Hello and welcome. You're listening to Building Blank,
a collaborative world-building podcast.
We're your hosts, Travis
and Greg,
and today we're diving into the world of deities. All right, and hey, Greg.
Hey.
How you doing?
I'm good.
Good. So this week, guess what we're talking about?
I have no idea.
No clue. Although we've been teasing it for a couple weeks, we are talking about religion, specifically, though, deities.
Yeah.
Because religion's a big topic. I think we can split it into a couple different things. But for now, we're going to talk about deities. So, what is a deity, you might ask?
I might.
So, a deity is defined as a deity or god is a supernatural being considered divine or sacred.
Okay, so that leaves the door pretty wide open.
Yeah, so in my opinion, first off, I think deities are a great space to be creative.
Yeah.
You can literally be anything you want to imagine. You know, like Spaghetti Monster.
God of spaghetti.
Yeah, or, you know, whatever. That being said, when writing deities in religion, there's a few questions I feel that we need as authors or DMs or whatever to ask ourselves.
Okay, so what would those be?
Those would be, are deities real in your world?
Okay.
How many of them exist? Are they flawed? Is it a loose or a tight pantheon? Where does their power come from? And how involved are they in the lives of mortals?
Yeah, I like those questions. Those are good.
Yeah, so we'll start at the top here. And are deities real? And in a lot of fantasy, gods and deities are real tangible entities.
Mm-hmm.
You know, clerics and paladins exist in D&D, for example. In Lord of the Rings, the Valar and the Maiar are known, right?
Right.
They're not really talked about a lot in at least in the movies. But for example, Sauron is a Maiar. He's a lesser deity, and so are Gandalf and the wizards.
Yeah, just in wizard bodies.
Yeah, and Galadriel was born in Valinor.
Yeah.
That's how old she is, right?
Yeah, isn't her grandfather the High King?
Yeah.
Of Noldor?
Exactly. So,
yeah.
like, they grew up, she grew up, at least partially, in the land of the gods.
Yeah. That's why her hair's so, like,
beautiful.
And divine, kind of.
Yeah. As opposed to gods being believed in with little to no proof. So, I really like Game of Thrones as an example of gods not being real, or it's really ambiguous.
Yeah.
There's no tangible
He's so good
proof.
at keeping everything ambiguous, right?
So in the religions of Game of Thrones, that's what they are. They're just religions. Even the ones where some magic is involved, specifically the Lord of Light.
Yeah, that's probably the one that comes to mind for me.
Yeah, even so, it's very ambiguous whether or not it's actually divine magic or they're just mages tapping into the natural magic of the world.
Yeah, I think that's the important distinction there. It's definitely magic.
Mm-hmm. There's definitely magic, and even like there's sometimes surprise when actual magic happens, because even I think the red lady, I can't remember her name, Melisandre, she says at one point to somebody, you know, the visions are just they're what I tell people, that they are what I make them.
Mm-hmm.
So that, you know, people do what needs to be done.
Yeah, and then the other dude there of Myr.
Yeah, Theros. He doesn't believe in it at all until he accidentally brings someone back from the dead.
Yeah, Beric Dondarrion.
Right?
He just keeps bringing him back.
Yeah. And he's not even sure if it's what it is, right?
They just send him to Westeros because he liked to drink.
Yeah, just to hang out with Robert.
Yeah. Because
they were so alike. So, you know, that's the way I would go with it if I was to do, they're not, like, it's ambiguous.
Mm-hmm.
There's a side note here, though, as I feel that it's easier to run the gods are not real or it's ambiguous in a written story rather than as a game, because you kind of have to discount player options such as the cleric.
Yeah, if you're not going to have real gods.
Yeah, like you can do it, but you then have to like explain where, I mean, you don't really have to, you could leave it ambiguous, but their power has to come from somewhere. Like, you got to know what that is, or you have to nerf the hell out of those classes.
Yeah, they just wouldn't have healing spells.
Yeah, and also game specific. Yeah. Like, some games don't have it at all. But because of that, I think it would be way easier just to write it rather than play it. So going forward, I'm going to assume that the answer to this question is that yes, the gods are real.
Yeah.
Just to make it a little easier.
I feel like even if they're not real in your world, writing them as if they're real to start with is a good place to begin, right?
Because you still, like, most of these questions assume that the gods are real.
Yeah, true. Like, this is like top down. These are the gods, and this is actually what it is, not like what the
are they real
think.
or not? And then if they're not, then I mean, the religion is whatever it is.
Yeah.
But next is how many exist? Is it one all-powerful Abrahamic, Judaic, Christian god?
Yeah.
Or is it, a plethora of, a whole pantheon of different nature gods, right?
Yeah. And I feel like with fantasy, it's almost like, can you even think of any fantasies off the top of your head that are monotheistic?
Other than Game of Thrones, which there is, the religion is monotheistic. Like, they're like, oh no, the Lord of Light is who exists. None of the other ones do, right? Or, the God of Many Faces exists, but that's them, not agreeing because it's ambiguous, right?
Yeah. So there's still many gods in the world, but in the religion, there's just the one.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Unlike in D&D, there's a ton of gods.
Yeah, and there's no question whether they exist.
Yeah, they exist, definitely.
Yeah.
Right? So the way I like to handle this is if there's one god, he's usually all-powerful, right? All-powerful, all-knowing. And if there's many, the power is kind of like distributed.
Yeah, it's just kind of diffused among all the gods.
Even like Zeus or Odin isn't all-powerful, all-knowing. Like, he still needs to do things. He still needs to rely on others of the Pantheon.
Yeah, and
for some things.
And they're still bound by, like, physics, kind of, more or less. Like, they're not everywhere all at once. They still have a physical form.
Yeah. And that's the way I would go with it, would be the more gods that I have, the less individually powerful they are. Still leagues and light years beyond what mortals can do.
Mm-hmm.
But, they're not all knowing and in perfect beings. So for example, I had an idea of, like, if you wanted to do a lot of gods, which would be crazy, I would never do because that's a lot of work.
Yeah.
Right? It's a lot of work. But if you wanted to say do like 150 or 200 or however many, the way I would do it is to be like local nature spirits is what gods are. Mm-hmm. So think Avatar: The Last Airbender, where like there's a spirit of this forest or a spirit of this river,
Yeah, and that's even kind of...
And they have dominion over that little
that's
area.
Kind of similar to the Greek too. Like, there would be a god for each of the rivers, or like...
Yeah.
They could be...
And the Chinese as well. Chinese
I actually don't know too much about Chinese mythology.
I don't know either. Most of what I do know is Journey of the West and Monkey King, because I am obsessed with Monkey King lore.
Yeah, you love him.
I don't know why. I've just, ever since I heard of Monkey King, I've loved it.
Isn't he kind of like a trickster?
He is.
Yeah, that's one of the best gods. Is
and
kind
that's
of
like
trickster god.
My defining character trait is that I'm mischievous and annoying. But anyway, so do you have one god or many? And how is that, power distributed? Which brings us to, are the deities flawed in any way? So is it the Lord of Light, who's all-powerful, all-knowing? He grants power, takes it away, bring people back from the dead. Or is it just, dirty Zeus and the boys, getting into mischief, doing their things?
Yeah.
They don't always know everything.
Yeah.
Succumbing to vices. Or is Thor, like, looking for his lost hammer? Who stole my hammer? He doesn't know everything, right?
Yeah. No, it's like... Especially the Greek gods. I don't know too much about the Norse ones, but it's more like a soap opera. Like, like this person, doesn't get along with that person because of this, and then Zeus is always cheating on Hera, and like with a bunch of different mortals and stuff.
Yeah, like, well, anything he sees.
Yeah, basically. Just transform into a bunch of different things.
Yeah, so I personally feel that it's more compelling for them to have some kind of flaw.
Okay.
Because, like, the god being all-powerful, all-knowing is kind of like, well, that's boring. Like,
yeah,
like you know what he knows. Like, it doesn't matter what curveball you throw.
yeah.
It's like, oh, it's in my plan.
And even like the Valar of Tolkien,
Yeah.
they're not perfect, right?
No, they're imperfect.
I mean, especially just like the figure of Melkor. Right?
Yeah.
Like, if they were all perfect,
that wouldn't have happened.
Yeah, you wouldn't have an evil.
Yeah,
Melkor
and the
running
entire
around.
events of the entire history of Middle Earth would never have happened.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think maybe some of that might even go back to like free will
Mm-hmm.
and stuff. I mean, how can you have free will if everything's perfect, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So,
and that brings another one, like, how human are they? So gods usually take the form of their worshippers.
yeah, exactly.
Typically.
Yeah.
I mean, they don't have to.
Yeah, well, I mean, the Norse gods look like Vikings, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And the Greek gods look like Greeks.
Yeah. So you can always play around with that. Like, maybe, your god is, a giant chicken monkey monster combination.
Yeah, and even if it was, that's actually how it looked. The people worshiping that chicken monkey monster would probably still think of it as them, maybe.
Well, that's the other thing, is like the mere fact that they are these divine beings, they're kind of unknowable.
Yeah, and I guess
Right?
that depends on like, can they be perceived?
Can they be perceived, or are they perceived in the only way that we can perceive them?
Yeah.
Right.
Well, like that goes back to the Zeus. Oh man, the myth is escaping me right now. But like, they don't show off their full power, and then I think one of the women that Zeus was with like wanted to, or something, see him as he actually was,
Okay.
and then he like kind of unveiled himself, and it just like burnt her up. I'm pretty sure that was Zeus, but it definitely might not be.
Okay. Yeah. But yeah, so like, can they even be perceived?
Yeah.
Right. And so if we're assuming that there's more than one, how tight is the Pantheon?
Okay, so like, what do you mean exactly by how tight?
So yeah, so what I mean is, if we take a look at like the Greek Pantheon or the Norse Pantheon or whatever, there's like a hierarchy.
Yeah,
Right?
definitely.
There's like, Zeus is on top, and then these guys do that, and they all kind of like loosely work together.
Mm-hmm.
Well, maybe not loosely, but like they work together to further a goal.
Yeah.
Not like tight, but, and this is a spectrum, of course. But, the Greeks, they all have their job. That's what they do. And any Greek any like random citizen will worship the lot of them. Right? That's the religion. They're all part of the same religion.
Yeah, like worship to a different god for a different thing.
Yeah.
And that kind of goes back to the power too, because that's really what's happening, right? They're dividing the power up, like their own like arena, like Zeus is of the sky and a bunch of other things, right?
Yeah. So with that, like that's what I mean by tight.
Okay.
Whereas we look at, say, the Forgotten Realms for D&D, it's a loose pantheon. I took a look, and the standard, not counting the race-specific gods, there's 38.
Oh, okay, wow.
And they really all have different agendas. They're all doing their own thing. Some of them might be friends, some of them might have alliances or be enemies of each other. But they're very loosely connected and separate. Like, they have their own agendas, they're doing their own thing. A follower of Talos probably wouldn't be making offers to Sylvanas, right?
Right, so they're all kind of like top of their class in their own way.
Yeah, but there's obviously like power levels when you look at them. Like there's
Yeah.
lesser deities and greater deities, etc. But they all kind of have their own thing that they do, and that's what they do, and they're separate.
So there's no high god of the D&D?
There is, but generally he's not worshipped. Like, he's like the god of the gods.
Is that kind of like Eru?
Yeah.
Iluvatar in
Yeah,
Tolkien?
exactly. So like he's like kind of unknowable to mortals.
Yeah, which makes sense, really.
And yeah, and there's different pantheons that are more tight. So like the I don't remember the name of it, but the Elven pantheon has their own, and they're more like the Greek,
Okay.
where they're a little tighter together. But as like a whole, most of them are loose, right? So you would maybe go to a temple of, say, Talos. I'm using Talos as an example because you play a cleric of Talos in my game.
Yes, I do.
And that would be it. So anyone who worships Talos would probably only worship Talos. Aside from like maybe sailors or something that worship like Talos and like a god of the sea and whatever as a set. And that's why I say it's kind of a spectrum.
Right.
Because, like, yeah, a sailor might make offerings to these 3 specific gods because that's to do with what he does. Right? Whereas they're not making any offerings to, like, a sun god or a fertility god.
Right, yeah.
Right? Oh, where are we here? So, yeah, that's a spectrum, and you can fall anywhere in between there. But where does their power come from?
Yeah, that's a good question.
So, there's so many answers to this question, and there's 2 major themes, or major, like, common ones that I've noticed. And that is, there is a divine spark of some kind, and every deity has like a piece of this divine spark, and that's what makes them a god. And that divine spark can usually be transferred if the deity is slain.
Okay.
So that's how mortals become, or, you know, other entities become godlike, is because they take the divine spark, or maybe one god takes the divine spark of another god and it becomes more powerful, etc.
Kind of like how energy can never be created or destroyed,
yeah,
sort of thing.
There's only so many, right?
And there's this divine energy, and there's a finite amount of it. Is that kind of what you mean?
Kind of like that, yeah. Or the other big one is worshippers equal power.
Yeah, I like this one.
Yeah, so this is the idea that the more worshippers a deity has determines its power level. So, or even if it's a deity at all, which you can gain or lose depending on what's going on in the world. It can make really interesting power dynamics.
Yeah.
Right?
Because, yeah, you could have gods trying to, like, plot to take over somebody else's worshippers, or like they're actively trying to increase it somehow. Yeah.
So, and that really goes down to how involved they are.
Mm-hmm.
Because if it's worshippers equal power, they're probably as involved as they can be, right? Trying to gain more worshippers.
Yeah, it's in their best interest.
Right? It is in their best interest to do that.
Or that, you know, even, that defines their godhood. So, of course, they're going to be involved.
Is in, say, Game of Thrones, are all those gods, the old gods, the 7, are they all real? They're just very not interested in mortals, right? Yeah. Or are they, right? How involved are D&D gods? Do they, grant paladins power or clerics power? And that's another one little point I want to bring up is not every priest has to be a cleric.
Yeah, that was something I didn't know. Like, you were telling me about how rare a cleric would actually be. Like,
clerics with power are probably actually very rare. They're like the chosen warriors of the deities.
Yeah, which would make sense.
I was listening to something this week, actually, on this, and apparently clerics were based on the Knights Templar initially in like this first ed, which then became paladins. Like paladins are very based on that.
Yeah, okay.
But clerics initially, that's why they're more usually depicted as armored, whereas you'd imagine a priest being in a robe and just going around healing people,
more kind of castery.
Yeah. So yeah, cleric and a priest, there is a distinction. Usually clerics are also priests.
Yeah.
Just like jacuzzis and hot tubs.
Hot tubs are usually jacuzzis.
Yeah.
Is that what you mean?
Or the other way. Jacuzzis are usually hot tubs.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, do you have any questions?
Well, I was just thinking, like, what kind of examples do you have for the divine spark?
So that's how it works in some editions of D&D.
Okay.
I know for a fact.
That's not how Transformers work, is it? That's the AllSpark.
That's the AllSpark. I mean, it's similar.
Is it?
Well, the AllSpark is like the spark of like their deity, basically.
Oh, okay.
That like then grows out and grants life to everything else, to all the other Transformers. But I mean, it's not quite the same.
Yeah, and there's this really good video on the Skyrim religion.
Okay.
Done by Hello Future Me, and he talking about I guess how time or something gets shattered into a bunch of these different pieces. Okay. And then depending on the size of the piece, or this is the analogy he used, and the bigger the piece, kind of the more power they end up having.
Okay.
And then all the littler pieces kind of ended up turning into the mortals or something, like into the elves, and then, yeah, I don't know. So I wonder if that's kind of, like, that's the finite amount of power, right? Like,
yeah, there's only so much, and it's divided. The pie is divided however it's divided.
Yeah,
that's a good, cool idea. I actually don't know a lot about, like, Skyrim lore when it comes to deities and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
As much as I've played, like, I've played it for like over 10 years now, right?
Yeah.
I had no idea about that.
Yeah, I should actually watch that video again. But then, yeah, and then the Worshippers one, that just reminds me of, American Gods. It's like probably the simplest example. And then, yeah, and that's kind of cool because it's like, then they end up having gods like the internet, where it's just like enough people believe in it. Mm-hmm. And then, like, oh man, I think, because the main guy in there, well, I won't give anything away, but he's talking about how flight wasn't possible until Newton comes along and then talks about gravity, and then everybody starts believing in it, and then another person comes along and they tell you how flight should work scientifically, and then everybody believes in it, and then that's how flight's possible in that world, is just because everybody's believing in it. Not because it's actually there's not because there's immutable laws, but it's because these people said they're immutable, and then everybody believed it. Yeah. Okay. And so that's kind of cool playing around with that.
That's neat.
And then just before we started, I was looking at Discworld.
Okay.
Because I guess it runs the same way.
Yeah, I know nothing about Discworld. I'm told that I would really enjoy it, and it's on my read list, but there's a lot of things on that list, and anyway, but reading about it.
Yeah, so that would, a couple examples there.
Cool. Well, I think with that, we are going to take a break. After the break, we are actually going to read out our listener submissions.
Yeah, for the gods.
Yeah, so stay tuned. And welcome to the break.
Welcome.
So this is the part of the episode where we're not talking about deities.
Yeah.
We're talking about how much we love you.
Oh, I was going to say how much we like drinking tea.
Well, tea is good. We got fresh cups of tea. Mm-hmm. My throat was a little dry in the first part there, so let's, it's nice to get a little bit of hot water down. But anyway, so we just wanted to say, if you guys want to submit anything, whether it be shopkeepers, any PCs, innkeepers, any kind of business, anything like that, or if you want to, send us in deities or towns or anything.
Yeah.
Just hit us up. You can comment on any of our posts at any time. We'll see it. We'll put it in our little Google Doc spreadsheet here, and we'll read it out on air. So, you can do that on Facebook, Building Blank, a collaborative world-building podcast. You can do that on Instagram, Building Blank Podcast, or you can always email us, buildingblankpodcast@gmail.com.
Okay, cool.
So with that, I think we'll get back to the show. All right, and welcome back.
Welcome.
All right, we got our fresh cups of tea, and I think today we are going to be reading out the submissions that you guys sent us.
Yeah, and talk about it maybe a little bit.
Yeah, so we're going to start from Facebook. We're going to start with our good friend Nick.
All right.
So he gave us a small list. Petty Fish, God of Gifts and Second Chances, which sounds really cool.
Yep.
Petty or Pity? Pity Fish.
Pity, yeah.
Pity. Anasai, Spider God of Thieves, which sounds spooky.
Anansi?
Anansi, and Ellelin, patron goddess of bards with stutters. Yeah. That's so specific, and I love it.
Yeah, no, that's good. And then, so thanks, Nick, for
sending
Nick. That in.
We really appreciate you taking the time to send something in.
Yeah, we really appreciate it. And then our next one is from Ash, and so she says that she's been in a country music mood lately, and more specifically, the country ladies of the 90s and 2000s.
Classic.
And so apparently that's how this happened. And so that she says that they are the sister goddesses of country music, and that is Rose, Poppy, Clover, Daisy, Mallow, Marigold, and Primrose.
Classic names.
Yeah, so These sisters sing from the heart to spread love, joy, and comfort. They may be called upon with offerings of incense, wildflowers, fine wine, and your own meaningful musical offering. If summoned, they will gift you sisterly advice on one question you ask, through a country song. Their musical talents know no bounds, and they are avid lovers of music. They are lovable goddesses and have been said to randomly show themselves to followers in times of strong emotional events, playing a song that their hearts needed to hear.
That's amazing. So what I like about this is it kind of fits. There seems to be a theme going on with a lot of like bardic song stuff.
Yeah, true. Hey.
So I really, really love that. And Poppy, Clover, Daisy, Mallow, Marigold, Primrose. That's so awesome.
Yeah. Thanks, Ash.
Thank you, Ash. We really appreciate sending that in. All right. And then we got one from Lee. I love Lee's submissions. They're always really interesting. This one's a bit of a long one, so bear with us, and we are going to read it. It's called The Seven Sisters. This story is told by the peoples who have long lived together near the equator of the world. Long ago, when the stars were formed and the world and the work of the oldest gods was complete, there were a group of 7 sisters. These goddesses were known for their power and their fairness and beauty, and most of all, their caring natures. The goddesses took upon themselves one day to create and craft the world, molding it from a lump of clay, folding in the fire and water, and carving the mountains from valleys, and finally adding in the plants and the animals of the sea and the sky and of the land. Once this was complete, the sisters looked at their new world and at each other and knew that this planet needed caretakers, and each agreed to create a people of their own to work together around the world in peace and harmony. The goddess Orna created the dwarves. She created them to be keepers of the deeps and of the ores and gems and stone. She is the goddess of strength and labor and wealth. The goddess Ikar created the elves. She created them to be strong and stubborn and tireless. She is the goddess of the edge lands, beaches and swamps, of stubbornness and of unbending will. The goddess Alabaeth created the orcs. She created them to watch over the wild spaces and forests. She sparked in them a great love of learning, of intellect, and of deep thought. She is the goddess of intelligence, of education, of imagination. The goddess Belanak created the gnomes. She created them to be swift and stealthy, and to see that which is overlooked. She is the goddess of shadows, of night, of racing, and of rogues. The goddess Garbor created the humans. She created them to be hardy and full of energy, made them tough and tenacious. She is the goddess of fertility, of health, of childhood, and of the joy of life. The goddess Sarunak created the halflings. She created them to care for the land and of the peoples, for crops and animals, and all things to eat. She is the goddess of growth, of green things, of domestic animals, of crops and harvest. The goddess Ponos created the Aethern, I can't do it.
Yeah, there's like the tick sound that she has in there.
Yeah. Tisk tisk. So she created them to care for the skies, for the high places and for those that dwell in them. Note, the Aethkin are a lost race and have gone extinct. They were a humanoid race that had 4 limbs and 2 beautifully feathered wings. They were shaped like elves, but in miniature, only standing as tall as a halfling, and they had very frail and light bones and are remembered as having the most beautiful voices, both speaking and singing. With their extinction, the goddess Ponos is now the goddess of flight and air, but also the goddess of death and sorrow and of the afterlife. The 7 sisters looked at their creations and each other and were highly pleased. They rested and watched their creations spread across the world. At first, there was joy and harmony as all the races learned to and grew, taking up the skills and tasks and creating together. However, after a time, the sisters looked down with horror, seeing conflict springing up across the world. They watched with great despair as orc fought elf, human fought halfling, and all the races fought each other in innumerable combinations. The lines were drawn, and humans divided up the lands, each fighting to protect and enlarge their territories, killing each other in droves over nothing but titles and battered ground. The sisters, in their grief at this conflict, decided to force a change. They wrapped their hands around the world, hiding it from the star, introducing a time of great cooling. For many years, thousands of people died, either in continuing combat or in their separate lands, starving or freezing, while hiding away from others with their kin. The numbers of people grew thin upon the world, and the sisters worried that there would never be peace. Finally, the remaining survivors of all the races gathered in the warmest surviving lands. They shared their skills and knowledge with each other, and a peace slowly began to grow. With this, the seven sisters thought that their creations had learned their lessons and removed from their lands, from the planet, allowing it to warm in the sun once more. It has been many years since these early times, and we know that as long as the sisters watch over us, we must be careful that neither shun our neighbors nor start wars with those different than us. We can see the seven sisters watching us over every night. They are constellations encircling the equator, each taking turns watching over us as the seasons change beneath their gaze. That was beautiful and amazing. Thank you so much, Lee.
Yeah, thank you very much, Lee.
So I have ideas to tie these all together. And we still have some time, so that's perfect. So I'm thinking the primordials, being us and the other people who listen, created gods, which they did.
Yep.
And I want to say these seven sisters are more like greater deities. Okay.
Yeah, I like how she kept with our theme too, like the orcs kind of being intelligence and deep thought.
Yeah.
And then the elves not being evil, because we never really said they were evil.
No.
They're just not like...
They're kind of like swapped roles.
Yeah, and then she made them strong and stubborn and tireless, which is really cool. And like goddess of the edgelands, beaches and swamps. Like that beaches part works really well with our like kind of nautical theme we're going with. So
yeah, I
love how this just really goes in there. So thank you for keeping it kind of accurate within what we're working with too.
So to tie it all together, what I'm thinking is the seven, all of this that Lee describes happens in the Dawn era.
Yeah.
You know, the time before time. And they're like the greater deities. I want to say Ash's set and Nick's set are lesser deities, like not lesser, but like more of the earth.
I really think of Ash as much like the muses in Greek.
Exactly. That's what I was thinking too.
They're more like a practical god, like an everyday god.
Yeah. Whereas like Lee's don't interfere with mortals so much anymore after the Great Freezing. Ash's and Nick's probably are the ones doing making clerics and making pacts with people and giving out power to followers.
Yeah, and I just wonder if like because there's these seven sisters, but then also Ashes end up making seven. So
there's six.
Is there?
Seven. No, you're right.
Yeah, there's seven. Wonder if each one could be almost like you know how each of the Valar had like a Maiar under them. It could almost be like that. That's a great idea. You know, like each one corresponding to a different one of the seven sisters of the greater kind of deities.
Yeah.
So there's something we could play around with there. And the other thing I really liked that goes well with what we already had going was the great cooling.
Yeah.
And that kind of works with, remember we were talking about the ice caps and then the flooding of the earth and what the Barnacle King wants to do. So this can all really tie together real well.
Yeah.
So
I really like it. I really appreciate how everything kind of just fits together.
I also like the amount of women, like the goddesses. Yeah,
I like that it's mainly goddesses. It kind of invokes that feeling. I don't know. It's different. It's not as like if it's how Odin and Thor are like, oh, we're here, we're men.
Yeah, and we're the king, the Allfather.
Yeah,
and Zeus.
What we say goes. Like they're like,
like the mother.
We care.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh no,
gods they actually care about the races and stuff. Rather than not.
And also I really liked, although it's hard to pronounce the Aetherin.
Yeah,
but
I like that.
With the tisk sound. That's so sad.
Yeah.
Like they're basically pixies, right? And then...
Well, they're like halfling sized. They're like little cherubs.
Yeah, but they had the two beautifully feathered wings. Oh, so feathered wings. I was imagining like even though it says right there feathered, I was imagining kind of like pixie-like. But yeah, shaped like elves, feathered wings, and then as tall as a halfling. And then, yeah, beautiful voices. I wonder...
Like maybe when you like go to the tops of mountains, you might find some ruins that are super ancient.
Like, yeah, I already changed something. What if these are supposed to have the most beautiful voices? What if 7 of them like survived or something and became these country music goddesses?
Oh, that's a good idea.
Right now, there's kind of like 2 things we could do there. It's like, are they each have like a Maiar under them, or are these like the last remnants of the Aether in? I think is kind of how Aether.
I can't pronounce it. I've tried. I've been practicing like the last week, and I can't say it.
But yeah, and then it just goes so it gets so sad. The goddess Ponos is now the goddess of flight and air.
Yeah,
but also the goddess of death, of sorrow, and of the afterlife.
Mm.
So yeah, no, I guess that wouldn't really work with the singing.
We'll figure it out. Yeah. I like the idea of them being like Maiar, like they're more involved with the world rather than the 7 sisters being like kind of over deities.
Yeah, and like the hands, removing them and then kind of warming the earth again is just kind of like a metaphor for them like taking their hands off the like
get going hands off.
Yeah,
right. Like we're not involved anymore. Yeah. And
I don't know if that's what she meant, but that's
the way I kind of took it.
Yeah, definitely.
But yeah, I really like that idea and I really appreciate that. But yeah, I think now we should jump over to our weekly inspiration.
Okay.
Because that was inspiring.
Yeah.
But I want to hear what inspired you this week, Greg.
Well, going off of this theme of 7, I got a 7 themed thing as well.
Okay.
So in my Greek class there, they kind of mentioned the 7 sages of Greek antiquity, I guess. And although nobody's like, there's no unanimous which ones the 7 were.
Okay.
And so it doesn't really matter. The main thing I wanted that inspired me was the 7 sages, just like the name.
Yeah.
And it kind of made me think like, what if there was 7 sages of the orcs?
Okay.
You know, and like
that's how their like races like run, or
like those are kind of like the leaders of their race, I guess.
Okay.
And so I was just kind of thinking of that, and then maybe there'd be like 7 different kind of tribes or something, and then the Tethi Vala or just one of them.
That's really cool.
Yeah, thank you.
I like that. That's a really cool idea.
And then they could maybe think tie in the 7 sisters thing as well into that somehow. But yeah, what inspired you this week? So
actually, well, we were doing our weekly planning session. I'm going to talk about we've been talking, you had said something about like you were going to make your character for this like a druid.
Mm-hmm.
But then you weren't really sold on druid, and it didn't sound like you actually wanted, like, mechanically a druid didn't really fit for what you wanted. You wanted more like a cross kind of between a druid and a monk, basically. Yeah, and you were going to call it a Wayfinder, right?
Yeah.
So then with that, I decided, you know what, maybe we can make our own class. Like, I don't usually like doing that.
Yeah.
Like, it's a big job, and then we started, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it is a big job, and we're like, okay, what is the main feature that's not like unique to another class already? And I think we finally decided on creating a subclass for monk.
Yeah.
Making it a like blend with monk with some druidic type abilities and some like ranger type abilities, because that's what I imagine a Wayfinder being, kind of like a Duendine ranger almost.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm working on currently. All my personal world stuff is like taking a back seat.
Yeah, well, I was telling you, I completely stopped working on my other world just to
focus on this.
Well, yeah, just to prioritize.
Yeah, I think this is a little more important to me too now.
Well, it's hard to do like
it's hard to do
worlds.
Yeah, it is very hard to do more than one at a time. But yeah, so that's kind of what I'm trying to work on. I'm trying to do a little bit of research, and I'm going to make a subclass that we're going to then publish for anyone to use, called the Way of the Wayfinder for monks.
Yeah, where can we publish something like that?
Well, we can just like put it on our page.
Yeah.
Yeah. We'll figure it out.
That'd be cool.
Yeah. And this is the first time we're doing a live stream. We're live streaming our part 2. Oh, hello. But yeah, that's kind of what inspired me, was just our talk about like what you wanted to make this character kind of like.
Yeah.
Yeah, because he's not quite druid, not quite monk. You wanted him to be more like hands-on martial a bit, but then like making a martial class didn't really fit either, because giving him the armor and weapon proficiencies didn't really fit with the theme either.
Yeah, I just, the main thing I want him is to have a black, like,
an ironwood staff.
Yeah, made out of the iron.
That's the other thing that I'm going to work on, is making some ironwood weapons as a thing. They'll probably mostly just have like a +1 or something, but we'll figure them out.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's that. And yeah, so if you'd like to get a hold of us or submit anything, please let us know. You can hit us up on Facebook, comment on any post. It really doesn't matter which. We will see them, and we will put it on our Google Doc list here. And so hit us up on Facebook, Building Blank Collaborative World Building Podcast. Hit us up on Instagram, Building Blank Podcast. Or you can always email us, buildingblankpodcast@gmail.com.
Yeah.
We have a Discord if anyone wants to jump in. I think I fixed the links. I hope. But it'll be in the description. It worked for me last week, so I'm hoping it works for me this week. And so if anyone else has anything, just feel free to always just let us know.
Yeah, and thanks again to Nick and Ash and Lee. Just keep
Thank you
sending
so
us
much.
stuff, and we appreciate everything. Well, or like you've already sent enough, but if you want to keep sending stuff,
we love
keep sending it. Yeah.
Again, like we would more like to be kind of curators.
Yeah.
For your content, and the whole idea of this whole podcast was to make like an open source world.
Yeah. And like I don't know of anybody doing that per se, so like we're just kind of figuring it out as we go.
Yeah, exactly.
And so just keep sending us stuff, and we'll just keep trying to figure it out, and showcase your guys' creativity.
Yeah, that's perfect. That's what I love to do.
Yeah.
So all right, everyone have a great week. It's getting so nice out.
Yeah.
Don't slip on any ice, because there's still a little bit of ice out there. The front steps outside my place look so treacherous. But anyway, have a great week, and we love you.
Okay.